All right. So this was supposed to stream on both YouTube and X, but it's claiming that I don't have an X premium account, which I absolutely, totally do because I bought it this morning. I guess maybe StreamYard's just not recognizing it yet. My plan is by, say, the end of the month, I want to be streaming on here and on X and on Rumble all at once. So that way people have multiple different preferred platforms because there's actually not a big sports presence on Rumble, I noticed. So maybe I can make a few new Canes fans by, getting established over there. Twisted Wrister and a couple other hockey accounts I've noticed are over there, but there's actually not very many. So, some quick channel news before I go into the video. First of all, thank you all for joining me on semi-short notice. I was definitely going to make a video considering what happened with Seth Jarvis getting the contract extension. And I just want to say one more time, thoughts, prayers, and condolences to the Gaudreau family, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Calgary Flames, everyone who knew and loved Johnny Gaudreau. I never heard anybody say anything bad about the guy. I knew Edmonton Oilers and Vancouver Canucks fans who absolutely loved him. So I hope that, they can find some peace and comfort and solace in knowing that that Johnny and Matthew were remarkable people by all accounts that I ever heard. So, may they rest in peace. And tragic, senseless thing. And I really wish it hadn't happened. I think we all do. So the next thing is we are going to cover the Seth Jarvis extension. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And it actually interlaces with the other two topics of this particular video because we're going to have, I fed you already. Yes, you. Sit. Good boy. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Seth Jarvis video. The other dog's in here, by the way, if you notice the little dust bunny running around back there as well. The Seth Jarvis contract extension also intertwines with how much cap space the Hurricanes have now because this contract structure is something new. And Jesper Fast will be going on LTIR because of the season-ending neck surgery. And that opens the Hurricanes up to where they have enough cap space to potentially still make a move. And I'm not talking about like a depth player. I'm talking about maybe you could still get someone like Nikolai Ehlers. That depends on some other factors, but we're going to cover all that. And before I do, though, I'm going to get to the couple of comments we got in here. First off, we have BTS, not the band. What's up, buddy? Good to see you. And Matthew Brown, what's up, bud? Jarvis extension was the best news coming out of the offseason period. Absolutely. Especially for us with the Canes. I know a lot of people were freaking out after free agency and everything. I personally I didn't get too worried about it. I remember it was 30 minutes into it, and I remember writing a post on X and telling people, hey, calm down a little bit. It's like we're like 30 minutes into free agency and everybody's losing their mind because, oh no, Pesci's gone. Okay, well, that was all but confirmed that was going to happen. Oh no, Shea's gone. He also got more money than I wanted Carolina to pay him, more particularly with that term. Yeah, BTS, I'll get to that in a second. You're absolutely right. Steph Nason, while I really, really, really liked him, was not irreplaceable. And we got a comparable player with more term for less money, and that contract would be really easy to buy out or to ship out should we needed to, in that of William Carrier. So, the Hurricanes had what a lot of people said was a catastrophic offseason. I don't agree with that, especially in terms of the defense. I did not know Shane Gostisbehere was on our radar to come back. I'm very, very excited about that. And I also didn't know that the Hurricanes were remotely in on Sean Walker. When I do the defensive deep dive, I'm going to talk about why that pair, if it is a pair, which I expect it to be, why that pair is going to be particularly important, especially for offensive zone draws. This team has trouble scoring at times, and that pair will be really, really instrumental in producing some offense off of offensive zone faceoffs, kind of like Shea and D'Angelo were showing signs of. So that pair is going to be really essential in that regard. And don't sleep on what those two guys can do defensively. Sean Walker is not as good as Brett Pesce defensively, but where he makes up for that is how much offense that he chips in. So the offseason is not over for the Canes yet, and if they make one more move before the season starts, especially considering that Jesper Fast is unfortunately on LTIR, then, that was another factor that they were probably waiting on to see if Jesper Fast could even play. I'm hoping that he can get healthy. I hope his career is not over, and there would still be some room to be able to bring him back, I'm sure, after the season is over, but we'll see. BTS, not the band, says, I think $7.5 million for Jarvie was a steal. Weren't people saying 8.5? I thought he would get right around 8. I really did. And the cool thing about it is like, so it's like when Aho got signed, I said anything under 10 for this guy's a steal. They got him in at 9.75 average annual value. I said anything under 8 for Slavin was a steal. And they got him at 6.43 or whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's even better. Jarvis, this is really immensely good value, especially considering you invested in a player that's going to be in his absolute prime the entire time that he's under this contract from the age of 22 to 30. That is the perfect time to sign a player with all the offensive upside, all the defensive responsibility, all the franchise cornerstone capabilities of Jarvis. There's only two players that I've ever thought could potentially overtake Aho as the best forward on the team, and that was Seth Jarvis and Martin Necas. Now, for Martin Necas, that ship may have sailed, but I think that that potential for him to get close to Aho is there. We've seen flashes of it. We will see. That reminds me, I'm going to tell you all one funny thing before I get to this, and I'm going to say this as a very big Jesperi Kotkaniemi fan. There was, but I'll get to that in a moment. But we got Jarvis under 8. Anything under 8 for him is a steal. And that extra $400,000 of cap space every year that would have been his average annual value without the deferment at the end, absolute steal. We have got so many guys on this team locked up for under what their market value is. And maybe it's not significant for each of them. For Slavin, it is. Aho, okay, it's $25,000 less a year. It's not significant, but that stuff adds up, especially as the cap goes up, and that's more space you have to go out and get someone at the deadline or land a big free agent, because I'm keeping my eye on two particular ones right now. I'll talk about that more towards the end of the slides. I'm sitting around daydreaming about Mikko Rantanen being a Hurricane. I know that that's probably unhealthy and it's not going to happen. He's not going to leave Colorado. But if you think that a combination of Gensel, Aho, and Jarvis were good, or Gensel, Aho, and Svechnikov were good, Mikko Rantanen with Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis would be a remarkable line, in my opinion. And I've looked at some of the metrics to kind of come up with the idea to back that up. So I'll get to some more of the comments here. But yes, BTS, you're absolutely right. Anything under 8 for Jarvis was great. And I was expecting it to be a little bit over. And in the grand scheme of things, it is, but it doesn't affect the cap like that thanks to the way that they structured the contract. Travis C., one of my first subscribers. What's up, pal? Good to see you. Hey, man, hope you were having a great weekend. Just bought my tickets for opening night. We'll be traveling 3 hours away and can't wait. Yeah, I'm going to skip opening night this year because every time that I go to opening night, they either lose in the second round or they get swept in the conference final. So I'm done. I'm done going on opening night. What I will be doing, they're playing in Pittsburgh on October the 18th. And since I live near DC, it's only about a 4-hour drive. So me and like my best friend in the whole world, we're going to drive up there and we're going to go see that game. And I'm planning on getting some ice time while I'm up there. I found a rink that has pickup at like Friday afternoon or Friday at 11 o'clock, and the game's on Friday night. So considering all the food that I'm going to be eating, getting some ice time while I'm there definitely would not hurt. BTS says, I hope the NHL does something for CBJ because they did lose their best player. Yeah, I'm pretty sure like Waddell's probably working the phones to like maybe figure something out with that. I mean, he might not be yet because, I mean, I feel so bad for them that they're probably, on top of the fact that you lost, by all accounts, a great human being, you lost, their best player other than Adam Fantilli. I mean, and we've only seen a little bit of what Adam Fantilli is really capable of. But yeah, like it's a gut punch all the way around, no matter where you look at it from the human aspect or the hockey aspect. It's just sad because when I started seeing that stuff come up on Thursday night, I'm like, I hope to God that this is a sick joke and someone's just a total piece of shit coming up with this. And unfortunately, it turned out being true. Sorry for the won't. That was my country coming through. I still do stuff like that too, dude. Don't feel bad because I say things up. If I go home for like 3 weeks, and if I were to go home for 3 weeks and come back up here, nobody would understand anything that I'm saying. Like nothing. Travis C says, didn't Slavin take a hometown discount? Truly shows he wants to be here. Yeah, he really did. He could have easily got 8, and no one would have thought twice about it. But we're going to talk a little bit about Slavin's contract because it's actually a little bit relevant to the Jarvis one. Matthew P., what's up, buddy? Good to see you. Do you think Tulsky will use deferred money in future contracts as much as possible, or the rest of the league follow suit? Yes, I think that this has set a precedent that is going to eventually cause a problem. I think that eventually it's going to be a element of discussion with the next CBA. And I also think that, well, one, we're going to start getting called cap circumvention and cheaters and all this other shit. And they're like, oh, look, Vegas Golden Knights, East Coast. I guarantee you all that stuff's going to start. And the difference is, though, is like this was totally legal and the league like clearly didn't have a problem with it. Otherwise, they would have stepped in and stopped it. So I think that this is going to cause some, at a minimum, it's going to cause some really heated discussions in Boca Raton when the owners go meet there and everything. That's one thing I definitely do think will happen. Is next time CBA comes up, this is going to be an element of the discussion. And I also think, along with that, like for example, the Jack Eichel situation where he did the research about getting the artificial disc put in his neck. Like, I think stuff like that's going to be brought up next time that there's a CBA and all that type of stuff. I'm not saying that I think there'll be a lockout or anything like that, but every time you have a little issue like this, it's one more thing that the union and the league is going to potentially have a point of contention about. So I could definitely see that happening. Matthew P says the issue with Vegas was exaggerating injuries. Yeah, that's exactly what they were doing, and everybody knows it. So it's the problem with it is it's like, I don't really care for their fan base, just to be perfectly honest. And I really wanted them to beat Washington in the Stanley Cup Finals for two reasons. One, I don't like the Caps, and two, I thought it would have been a good story considering the shooting at the Jason Aldean concert right before the season started and everything. But they've just kind of been really douchey about that. And, Mark Stone clearly was not ready to come back and play. And if something like really bad had happened to him, then that would have made a completely different discussion in regards of, okay, you take players off the ice, quote unquote, for their safety and to prevent further injury, but then you conveniently bring them back for the playoffs and something happens to them. And speaking of that whole Mark Stone thing, I think that, so when I've been making this video about Slavin that I'm making, I clipped a bunch of footage. And one of the things that I found, Slavin's skate might have actually been what lacerated his spleen. And if that's what happened, it was Mark Stone's own damn fault because he checked him in the numbers from behind when this guy's one of the best defensive forwards in the league. This guy's one of the best defensive forwards in the league, and he could have made a stick on puck play. He had a step on Slavin and everything, and he just straight ran him over in the numbers. And when he did, Slavin's skate came up, and it looked like it caught him like right around here or maybe right around here, somewhere in there. I'm not a spleen expert, but I'm pretty sure maybe that could have been something because if I remember correctly, he left that game early. But we'll talk about all that. But first, the big and the best news of the day. Credit to Daily Faceoff for breaking the news first. Frank Saravelli, I took parts of the article that were relevant to what we're going to talk about. It talks a little bit about the precedent setting, but that's something that we can kind of discuss amongst ourselves here. More than anything, I just want to talk about the structure of the Jarvis contract and how it's going to affect the Canes and ultimately the rest of the league. As far as how it's going to affect the rest of the league, that's going to be a little bit more of a summarized topic at the end. So Frank Saravelli here. Let me take a sip of this sparkling water first because I just got back from the gym, so I'm thirsty. All righty. Frank Saravelli here wrote this article from Daily Faceoff. The Carolina Hurricanes restricted free agent Seth Jarvis have agreed to terms on a new 8-year, $63.2 million contract. Sources tell Daily Faceoff it's an important piece of business for the Canes, locking up the heartbeat of their team for the foreseeable future, but the way the contract is structured may be important business for the NHL's 31 other clubs. That's because Jarvis' new deal is set to become the first one of the first in NHL history to have a salary cap hit substantially lower than the typical average annual value because he was willing to defer salary. And the first thing that I thought when I saw this, I thought about the whole Shohei Ohtani thing. I don't think that this had any direct influence on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tulsky heard about that or read about it or something and decided, okay, let me see if this is something we can do in the NHL as well. Nearly every NHL contract in the salary cap era since 2005 has been prescribed a simple cap hit. Take the total dollars and divide it by the length of the deal, and you arrive at $7.9 million. So initially, when I did the math on that before I really read what was going on, I was like, whoa, okay, still a steal. You got him under 8. But then the more and more I read, I was like, wow, this is really good. So nearly every NHL, or excuse me, I already read that part. With this deal, Jarvis lands on the Canes books at approximately $7.5 million per year, a savings of $400,000 for each season. That's actually like really amazing. $400,000 could be the difference between you outbidding someone else for a really high valued free agent or being able to fit guys that you already have under the cap. $400,000, it doesn't sound like much because it doesn't even cover half of an ELC nowadays, but it's still a very, very important amount of money. It adds up, especially with the cap going up, and it's probably going to go up if everything keeps staying the way it is. I imagine it's going to go up 4 or 4.5 on average every year for the next several years. So the next part here, this is also from the article. In fact, the new 8-year deal for for Hurricanes defenseman Jacob Slavin was the first deal to be registered this summer with a deferred payment, but it wasn't significant enough to alter the salary cap hit in a meaningful way to register anyone's radar. It has been erroneously reported that Slavin signed an 8-year deal, has a $6.461 million cap hit, but it is actually going to be $6.396 million per year. It's almost as if Slavin's deal was Carolina's trial balloon. And that was one of the things. That's why I have Slavin's deal up here on the screen. We'll talk about that in a moment. How do deferred payments work? Well, the first thing to know is they're not free. This is an example of Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon, who has somehow received a reputation of being stingy, actually spending more overtime to benefit his team in the shorter term. A smaller salary cap hit theoretically allows for more spending and thus a more competitive team if spent properly. So that's one thing I do want to touch on real quick. I don't think Dundon is cheap or stingy. There are some times where I'm kind of like, okay, bro, open the checkbook. But he hasn't done anything that makes me think that he's Mark Cuban 2.0 or anything like that. So if he actually brings an MLB team to Raleigh and if he's got a large ownership stake in it or owns the thing entirely, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't manage it much different than the Hurricanes, even though there's no salary cap in baseball. I don't agree with everything he does, but the fan experience is better. The team is better. It's had more sustained success than it's ever had. So clearly he's doing something right. So now what we're looking at here is Jacob Slavin's contract. And as you can see, the note at the bottom, this is all from the rest of this here is from Puckpedia, because the terrorist organization that is the Washington Capitals bought Cap Friendly, as we all know. Notes the signing bonus earned in 31-32 of $4.55 million is deferred until July 1, 2033, resulting in an adjusted cap hit. This is Slavin's contract. So that's a pretty significant amount of money over 8 years as it is, but it definitely seems like that this was a bit of a trial run to see if they could do this with Jarvis, because Jarvis was going to make more money and have the same term. So if that's really what they did here, if this was the 4D chess that Tulsky played, he did a remarkable job making this work. It was a great idea. So let's go on to the next thing here. Now we're going to talk about Jarvis's contract. A similar note. This is also, of course, from Puckpedia. Contract includes $15.67 million in deferred compensation until July 1st, 2032. $4.95 million for year one, year two, or year one and year two. It's $4.95 million. $5.77 million for year three, and cap hit is based on present value of deferred compensation. And the best part about that is the deferred compensation is during a time frame that the cap is not as high, so he'll make more of his money when the cap is higher. Not that that really that really matters when it comes to how much of a cap hit it's going to be. So, and I wanted to make sure I did all the math on this right when I was reading all this. So this is actually some pretty remarkable work by Eric Tulsky. So this let me go back. Didn't mean to do that. Okay, so this contract right here, it's not. I've seen some other ones that are kind of linear. Let me go back to the Slavin one for a second here. So the Slavin one, it's like it's pretty linear up until the end. It's the exact same. So it's 7, 5, 7, 6.5. Yeah, this is a pretty linear contract compared to the Slavin one, or I'm sorry, to the Jarvis one. The Jarvis one, there's a lot of different numbers here. So base salary, $2 million, $6 million, $4,250,000, $6,570 for the next several years after that, $1 million and $1 million. And then signing bonuses, it's heavily front-loaded in signing bonuses, which is good for Jarvis because he can get the money now and he can start investing it and all that type of stuff. And the cool thing about him getting a contract like this, he can go buy a house, set up in Raleigh and start his life there and everything like that. Total salaries, you'll notice also really front-loaded. And it has a minor's salary on there, even though like this guy is never going to play a day in the AHL in his life. All right, let me go back here. Okay, so we'll take this off the screen for a second. All righty. So essentially what it comes down to is they came up with a way to defer enough of the salary to lower the cap hit, and that saves them a lot of money over the course of time, and it's more money that they can spend bringing in more players. And it's cool that we were the first ones to do this. I'm surprised nobody else tried to do it before. And I think part of that comes from a lot of teams having their front office having a lot of like impatience or a sense of urgency, afraid that somebody's going to walk or that someone's going to demand a trade or something like that. And they don't want to let to risk them getting offer sheeted or ever hitting free agency or something like that. So there's not nearly as much negotiation. Now, does that bite us in the ass sometimes? Yeah, it kind of did with Gensel. But the more I think about the Gensel thing, we might have dodged a bullet because, for comparison's sake, let me put this back up here. This kid's 22 years old, and the sky is the limit for him. We have got him signed through his prime from the age of 22 to the age of 30, whereas we were signing Jake Gensel at 30 for 8 years. Eventually, Gensel was going to fall off. Seth Jarvis, if he has any fall off, which I don't think he will over the course of this 8 years contract, it won't be very drastic. We're going to be fine. And this is one of those things where the way that they set this contract up, along with Foss going on LTIR, opened up the possibility that we can still go make a trade. And I'm not talking about for some bottom six grinder, not another Martinook. I love Martinook, but I'm just saying not another Martinook. This is where you're opening up the possibility. If you can get salary retention out of other teams, you can bring someone on with around a $6 million cap hit. And you all, those of you who follow me closely, you already know who has a $6 million cap hit in Winnipeg that I want to bring to this team. So let's pull that off the screen for the moment. So essentially what we're going to do from here, I'll look at some more comments here in a second. And from there, we're going to start talking about how the lines are going to look without Jesper Foss and which rookies I think are going to draw in the lineup in his place or potentially could. So we'll go from there with that. I'm going to take a short break at one point for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll keep going, but we'll go through this part right here because I know I haven't done a whole lot lately. So, all righty. All right, so with the good comes the bad. Jesper Foss had season-ending neck surgery, and he will not play in the 24-25 season, which means him heading to LTIR is inevitable. He's still technically listed on IR, but he will clearly be on LTIR. He will not be back this season, unfortunately. So that leaves a big hole. Despite it not producing as much as some people would like for it to, the line of Jordan Staal, Jordan Martinook, and Jesper Foss was very essential to this team. They go out there and they shut down the other team's best lines so that our best lines can be on in more favorable matchups. They're really valuable on the road in that regard when the other team has last change. They forecheck really well. They hold the offensive zone down. They don't score a lot, but you know what they do? They generate a lot of offensive zone starts. And what I mean by that is with all the scoring chances that they generate, all the pucks they put on net, every time the goalie freezes them, that's one time that you're pulling those guys off the ice. And Aho, Svechnikov, Jarvis, Natchez, guys like that are going to take offensive zone draws where they're much more dangerous. They block a lot of shots. They eat a lot of pucks. They deny a lot of entry. That line is a very unsung important part of the team. So actually, before we go any further, let me go through these comments real quick because, Matthew, what you said actually bears some relevance to some stuff we're going to talk about here in a moment. So BTS says someone posted the Jarvis contract in the group chat and someone said the person who said is normally wrong. I thought, dang it. I just sent that to my family. Glad it was true. I didn't even notice that. My bad. Oh, no. You're talking about when J-Dub posted it in the chat yesterday. Okay, because I was at work. I didn't see that until well after you guys had already talked about that. But yeah, no, I waited to see. You know, as much as I don't like Daily Faceoff at times, Frank Saravelli is a legitimate source. It's just the Arizona guy over there is the one I really don't like. Johnny Hockey's last goal was against us. Yeah, I saw the video of that yesterday. First time I've ever been happy to be scored against. Yeah, little did we know at the time how much of an honor that was going to be that Johnny Goodrow, and the wraparound was like his thing. That was going to be the last time that we saw him score a goal. It just makes it all the more tragic, but it's really, it was an honor. Like, yeah, that was cool to see. Matthew P says, I'd like to see Jackson Blake take Jesper Foss' place with Staal and Martinook. Yeah, you'll. I'm going to make a very extensive and detailed case why I want Jackson Blake right there because, like I said on X before in some of my posts, that was the short answer as to why I wanted to. Or the short answer is, what do we do about this? Well, put Jackson Blake there, and I'm going to make a case about that. So. Now, speaking of, so Jesper Foss is coming off the books since he's going on LTIR. That's $2.4 million. That space, since it's on LTIR, as far as the daily hit of $2.4 million goes, That cap space does not accrue. That's not stuff that we're going to have extra at the deadline. However, it is stuff the Hurricanes could use now. So first, we're going to talk about how we can fill the lines, and then we will talk about the potential idea for maybe bringing in someone with somewhere between a 2.5, 3-ish cap hit up to around 6.2. And that's without moving any other salary out, any roster players out, or anything like that, because I don't think we should trade any of these prospects. All right, so the reason I'm showing the overall lines here first, some people might say, why don't we fill that spot with Bradley Nadeau? Why don't we fill that spot with Felix Unger-Sorm? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? So here's my reasons why I would not put Bradley Nadeau there. Bradley Nadeau is a sniper, and he may be what this team has been waiting for in regards of having someone whose job is to go out there and fit the puck into a coin slot. Players like that need to be in the top 6. They need to be with guys who distribute the puck well. Everybody in the top 6 here, Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, Kotkaniemi, and Necas, all those guys have pretty good puck distributing capability. And I know that like people might say, well, Kotkaniemi hardly did anything this year. Yeah, he had a rough year. But one of the things that makes Kotkaniemi valuable as the center is how good he is at doing those short, quick passes in the zone and on entry. He didn't do it as well as he normally does. But also, Kotkaniemi, when he's doing really well in the faceoff circle, having a right-handed shot like Bradley Nadeau when Kotkaniemi's taking faceoffs on the right side of the ice, that could be incredibly valuable because Bradley Nadeau is one of those guys that can get possession of a puck really quick and rip it, and before you know it, it's in the back of the net. He can do it off the rush. He's not one that's going to get you a ton of greasy goals. If you thought he was going to be someone who could score in that regard, then you can think about putting him in the bottom 6. Bradley Nadeau needs to be in the top 6. Additionally, Felix Unger-Sorm, his time will come. I don't think it's this season. I know that he was really, really impressive at camp last season. I liked what I saw, and everyone's like, yeah, he's the next Teuvo Teravainen. I do believe that as well. He will be on this team. I highly doubt that he will not make the team. I highly doubt he would be traded, but he's another guy that you need to wait and maybe put him to where he can be on a line that has more ability to produce because we've got plenty of guys who can distribute the puck. At that point, Felix Unger-Sorm would be a little bit of redundancy. If Necas does not stay here long term, then you could bring him up in that regard and maybe put him there. It's not that Felix Unger-Sorm is not capable. He doesn't fill a need right now. And then I put another combination of the overall lineup here. That's more part of the big overall deep dive that I'm doing. And I just wanted to use this slide as a preview of that and to talk about why I would not put Bradley Nadeau in that spot and why the players that I am looking at to potentially replace Jesper Fast in the lineup would not be anywhere other than the bottom 6 and how I would arrange it. And that's just me, but that's my rationale behind it, and I'm going to go into further detail now. All right, so here's the first one. This is the idea that I like the most. So let me pull this up right here, actually. Matthew P. says, I'd like Jackson Blake to take Jesper Fast's place with Stahl and Martinook. Okay. That is the best idea in my opinion. And here's why. So in this particular set, I have Jordan Martinook in his normal spot, Jordan Stahl in his normal spot, and Jackson Blake taking Jesper Fast's place. And then for a fourth line, or however you want to look at it, this is the bottom 6. Whichever line you want to be third and whichever line you want to be fourth, that varies. I guess you could maybe flip-flop them because Jordan Stahl and Jordan Martinook can kill penalties together. A Jack Drury, William Carrier, Jack Roslovic line, for example, I would see that as a depth scoring line. But there are other combinations here that I have. I have 3 other ones after this. I believe it's 3. This one right here is the one that I would like to see the most, whatever order you want to put them in. So upsides. This allows a highly successful checking line to stay together and not shuffle the entire lineup. Jesper Fast being out of the lineup was already bad. And 95% of the time, I agree with Rod Brindamore. I didn't agree with how he did the lines in the Ranger series. I felt like that you should have just left Jordan Stahl and Jordan Martinook alone and either done a plug and play with putting since KK was on the wing anyway because we had Kuznetsov. KK probably could have just filled into the Jesper Fast role a little bit better than other ways that they employed him and everything like that. Lower risk exposure for Jackson Blake making the jump sooner than expected. Line is not expected for high production, and that's what I was talking about before. You don't get a ton of offense out of this line, but that's not their job. Now, ideally, we'd have Jesper Fast, and this wouldn't even be a discussion, and Jackson Blake would be developing down with the Chicago Wolves. This may be a time where you can accelerate someone's development like Jackson Blake. However, you have to be very, very careful about exposing someone to NHL action, especially serious minutes before it's time to do that. So, or if you're doing it a little bit earlier than you're expecting, then I should say. So this would be a good way for Jackson Blake to get exposed to the NHL faster than what was initially planned. He can be with two very defensively responsible players who have a ton of experience between them. Between Jordan Staal and Jordan Martinook, I think it's over. That's got to be close to 2,000 games played between those two guys. And they're both role players. Jordan Staal, obviously the captain. Martinook also has a letter. Having both those guys on the ice with someone young like Jackson Blake that you're throwing to the Wolves a little bit faster can be really, really beneficial for his development. And it could fast track it a little bit compared to him playing heavier minutes in Chicago, even though he'd be playing less minutes with the Hurricanes than he would with the Wolves. But he would have the two best people around him to help develop him. And then if he does well with them, then you could look at moving him up the lineup if he's playing that well. But he can learn the real defensive side of things, and then that natural scoring touch can take over at the right times. So that's what I mean when I say lower risk exposure and fast tracking development with less minutes. He may never have to play a single game with the Chicago Wolves if he does well with those guys. And then when Jesper Fast comes back, or if you trade for someone else or anything like that, then you have a better idea of what you're getting with Jackson Blake, and you could potentially move him up the lineup early. Like, this guy was a Hobey Baker finalist, and the only reason he didn't win the Hobey Baker is because the guy who won it is Macklin Celebrini. So, biggest things, Blake is a good skater. He's very physical, and he has a high compete level, even though he's only 5'10", but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's why I think he could closest replicate Jesper Fast's results. It's kind of a plug-and-play situation. He just has to fit in well with those two, forecheck, do everything that he has to do defensively, and then after that, the points will start racking up for this kid because he's very talented. But this would be a good way to where he could play 14, 15 minutes a night, 5-on-5 at least, and kind of fast track his own development. It would be kind of like when Seth Jarvis couldn't go to Portland to play with the Winterhawks because of the whole, COVID thing, and he got time with the Wolves. I think that was significant in making him a better hockey player than we even already anticipated that he would be. So that would be my biggest rationale to put Jackson Blake in that spot. And then the downsides of it, a rookie could see much more ice time than initially anticipated, because Jackson Blake probably wouldn't have really gotten called up, with the exception of a situation where it's an injury. This is one of those times where Jackson Blake will get to take a step a little bit faster, and he knows it too. I guarantee you he was already getting ready for camp and working really hard, but now that he knows he has a legitimate spot that a player like him can fill a legitimate need, I can see him working even harder to try and make this team, knowing that if he works hard enough, it can be kind of like Warren Fogle. Warren Fogle worked so hard that Brendan Moore said, I had no choice. I could not send him back to Charlotte. Jackson Blake could be that guy in this situation. And he has a little bit higher of a ceiling than I think Warren Fogle had. So we'll see what happens with that. So the downsides here, or the other downside here, Blake's a little on the smaller side. He's 5'10", and I think 173 pounds or something like that. But Jesper Fast, he's not gigantic by any means. He's not small, but he's not gigantic either. So that could be maybe one area of concern, but it's also been an entire summer since we watched Jackson Blake play the little bit he did at the end of the season. He's probably put some muscle on. He's done some training, worked with a skating instructor, and worked on all the other little fundamentals of the game. So I think he would fill that role very, very well, and he would also do it for just a little over league minimum. So that's who I would put there if it were up to me. Now, next thing here, basically the same line combinations, but this time I have Jack Roslovic with Jordan Staal and Jordan Martinook. So Roslovic is a player I didn't know a ton about, and I've had to do some research and watch some videos and everything like that to really learn much about him. I didn't really pay a whole hell of a lot of attention to him during the series against the Rangers that we lost. So here's the upsides if you go this route with it. Roslovic has less unknown variables than Blake. 445 games played, 80 goals, 141 assists for a total of 221 points. So that's about 0.4, 0.5 points per game, rough math there. You could throw him in there, and, it would be a little bit easier to explain to him, hey, this is what you do on this line, because he's been in the NHL for a while now. He has some size. He's 6'1", 198 pounds. So a little bit of compensation there. The downside, he may be more effective to add to offense elsewhere. Other lines shown that it could produce more with depth scoring if he is with Drury and Carrier than it would Blake. And like I said, William Carrier is a player with a similar skill set to Steph Nason. So if you have a combination of Jack Drury, Jack Roslovic, and William Carrier, I think that line would give you a little bit above average depth scoring. That's why I say you can order this as a third and fourth line however you want. They ultimately play two different roles, 5-on-5. So me personally, I would put Roslovic with Drury and Carrier from the standpoint of them producing depth scoring, and as aforementioned, limit some of Jackson Blake's exposure, but put him with two guys that would be really, really good for him to learn from. He can be a little bit sheltered, and as he progresses and as he gets better, then you can think about moving him up the lineup. It's kind of the same thing with Roslovic in that regard, but I would personally rather see Roslovic with Drury and Carrier. Line combination number 3. This is where you don't factor Jackson Blake into it. You could put Brendan Lemieux in there. Now, the upsides of this, it saves money because Lemieux is only a $775,000 hit. Pepe is very physical, and he will allow the line to perform its role, particularly in offensive zone forecheck, because that's one of Pepe's favorite things to do is check somebody at the other end of the ice. He's really good at it. It allows the other line with Roslovic and Carrier to flank Drury, could allow the line to produce some extra depth scoring like I was talking about before. Downsides, you have a 13th forward, and that's what Brendan Lemieux is. I really like the guy, but he is definitively a 13th forward. He's not someone that a playoff team or maybe even a narrow cup window team, you don't want him in the lineup every single night. It would reduce the low amount of offense that line already produces. So that would be the only other downsides of it, because this line doesn't produce a whole lot as it is. But if you put Brendan Lemieux in there, their production will dip a little bit more. And then right here, the last combination I have is basically Roslovic, Martinook, and Stahl, and William Carrier, Jack Drury, and Brendan Lemieux. The upsides of this one allows Roslovic to add the physicality and scoring to Stahl and Martinook. Particularly, I would hope that he would really add the scoring. It saves money keeping Lemieux in the lineup, as aforementioned, but the same downside applies. 13th forward in the lineup in perpetuity. It would reduce possible depth scoring in the bottom 6 overall, and Lemieux or Carrier would have to play their offside because they're both left-handed and they both play left wing, and they don't really tend to play on the other side of the ice. I think I duplicated this one. Maybe I did. I don't know. Oh, that was the other thing. It would reduce the effective transition on a marginal amount. That was one thing I forgot. I was supposed to delete that other slide. All right. So overall, this is what the roster would look like in the event that they go with the first line combination I put out, which would be my most preferred one. Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, Nadeau, Kotkaniemi, Natchez, in no particular order with how exactly you would do that, because that would just be the top 6. Martinook, Stahl, Blake, that one I'm very specific about. And by extension, Carrier, Drury, and Roslovic, I would be very extensive about. Then you have Brendan Lemieux in the press box in case you need him. And, of course, the defense, we already know basically what that's going to look like. Slavin, Burns, Orlov, Chatfield, Gostisbehere, Walker, and the goalies, Frederick Anderson and Pyotr Kochekov. Now, you'll see it says projected cap space of 755,747. There's actually a lot more than that. Even though I have Foss in the LTIR column, for some reason, when you make this, it doesn't account for the other 2.4 million, but I'm going to get to that in the next slide. But first, we will look at the comments here. But yeah, Matthew, I totally agree with, I want Jackson Blake to take that spot, and I have a lot of rational reasons for that. And if it doesn't work out, all you got to do is send him back to Chicago and then rearrange your lines, put Lemieux in the lineup, whatever you got to do. It's worth trying out, especially early in the season. So speaking of Matthew, he says, so will our PP2 deployments, what will our PP2 deployments look like, or will we have 2 deployments? For this season, or at least for the beginning of it, I would say front load the hell out of the front, or out of the first unit to start, and slowly try to figure out a second unit. That's one of the good things about having Gostisbehere back. And I don't think Walker has ever quarterbacked the power play. I think he could, but you have Burns and Gostisbehere to quarterback the power play. So one, there's that. So I would like for, hey buddy, I would like for them to figure that out, just front load it. And then for the second unit, you could maybe do, if Nadeau's in the lineup, then put him on the second unit. And it's a low risk situation at that point, and he can learn from the guys around him. I'd have to really give it some thought on the power play units because my first thought is just front load them with the best ones you got. Maybe get Kokaniemi back in there for the second unit if he starts playing well again. But I'm really not entirely sure what to do about power play units. Drury, like you could maybe put him on the power play, but I'd rather them stick with the top six a little bit more for the power play units. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm really not sure. So I haven't given that a ton of thought, but my first thought would be if Nadeau's in the lineup, put him on the second unit. If Blake's in the lineup, put him on the second unit because this guy's supposed to be from what I understand, I'm projected to be a middle six player that plays all situations. And penalty killing, maybe he won't do that. He definitely won't do that off the hop, but power plays are low risk defensive situations. You could integrate him into the team and give him some power play minutes on the second unit and see what you got because the kid's clearly got some offensive upside considering how he played in college. So, all right. So this is what it opens up to here. So the cap space that the Hurricanes would have left over if Jesper Fast was healthy, when you take that LTIR money out of there, the cap space projected goes up to $3,155,747. That is a little over half of the cap hit for someone like Nikolai Ehlers. Now, the reason that I have draft capital up here is because I don't think the Hurricanes should trade any of their prospects, whether it's Nadeau, Trikazov, Felix Younger-Sorum, Morrow, none of them. Don't trade any of them. The Hurricanes are getting to the point where like they've got, I think, 37 out of 50 of their contract slots filled, and that's before Nikishin is signed, and there's several other players that aren't signed yet. So I would say that anything as far as making a trade goes, any one of these picks should be on the table, especially the 2025 ones, just out of the simple fact that you're going to create a logjam if you don't start either trading away picks or trading away prospects. I know they say you can never have too much depth, but it gets to a point where it's redundant and you're nerfing your ability for the team to compete now. So that's why I think maybe they should consider moving a couple of these picks out and trying to bring someone like Nikolai Ehlers in on retained salary. Now, do I think that Winnipeg would actually take that deal? Absolutely not. But it just shows that Tulsky working the magic he did with the Slavin contract and to a greater extent the Jarvis contract will create or has created circumstances in addition to Voss going on LTIR, it has created circumstances where you could bring in an impact player like Nikolai Ehlers, someone who I think that would be a perfect fit. If you bring Nikolai Ehlers in, then you don't have to worry about calling up either Blake or Nadeau. You could probably keep them both in the minors and let them develop there, and then you don't have to worry about it so much. But with this abundance of draft picks the Hurricanes have, they need to consider giving a few of them up to make the team better now. Any draft pick should be on the table for trades, first rounds included, because if they do have first round picks, they tend to lately anyway, they tend to trade them down to get more picks. Anyway, I'd rather get a roster player with what we have here. And we've got enough in the pipeline to where I don't think we have to worry about a lack of depth or anything like that for quite some time. Yes, this might be a little bit of a down season. Yeah, they're going to have to scrap to make the playoffs and everything like that. But they've opened up the possibility to where you can say, hey, here's a first and a second, give us Nikolai Ehlers and retain 50%. There was a reason I was talking about specifically a $6 million roughly cap hit. And then not to mention, if you bring Nikolai Ehlers in, you will have the money to give him $1 million and a half raise next year with all the money coming off the books for the cap going up. And then Nikishin will be in on an ELC for the first 2 seasons he's here. You've already got your core players straightened out. You already know how much you're going to pay Svechnikov, Kokaniemi, Aho, Jarvis. You could bring Nikolai Ehlers in and make him part of the core of this team, and you could do it with only giving up some draft picks, keeping all your prospects, all your roster players, and then be good to go. Matthew P. says, IDK, Darren York has taught me that even a 6-round pick can have a ton of value. It can. It can have a ton of value. I'm a firm believer of that because, like, that guy right there that I have the sweater of over there, he was a 4th rounder. Nobody knew that he was going to turn into what he turned into. But, you know, like, I saw flashes of it early. I'm like, yeah, this guy's going to be a really, really good shutdown defenseman. He'll probably be a really good first pair safety valve guy, or if he's not that, he'll be a second pair safety valve shutdown defenseman. And then I'm like, no, this guy's on another level. He is the shutdown defenseman. So, yes, late round picks definitely can have their value. But I personally would not trade any of the top prospects out of here. Let's see. You said something else here. See, I would trade prospects like Suzuki or Gunler before trading our future picks, but maybe Ehlers is worth it anyway. Yeah, okay. Let me clarify something. When I say do not trade any of our prospects, I'm talking about our big ones. I'm talking about Nadeau, Felix Unger, Sorum. Obviously, Nikishin ain't going anywhere. Morrow, guys like that, guys that we know are more than like guys we know will see sustained NHL time, so we know what we're getting out of them. Don't trade any of them. When I say like picks should be on the table, is because you can trade those and you still get to keep your prospect pool loaded, especially if you just trade the 2025 ones. And then that gives you another whole year to scout 26 and 27 and so on and so forth. But your prospect pool is already, the cup runneth over in that particular regard. So when I say don't trade prospects, I'm talking about like our top 5, 6, 7 guys. Pretty much anybody around Trikazov or above, I wouldn't trade any of them for anything. If we trade for Ehlers, who will get moved out of the top 6, I feel like Nadeau should be our second line winger. So we see what we got. Yeah, see, that's where it becomes a little bit tricky if you do bring Ehlers in, because then you look like that Nadeau wouldn't have as much of a spot to make the team. And I don't want him being on the stall line, and I don't want him being like anywhere in the bottom 6. He needs to be with a bunch of guys who are playmakers. That's the tricky part of trading for someone like Ehlers. I would like to have him. I really would. He's still my number 1 target on the board. He's my number 1 free agency target, because the other free agency target I have, he's not going to make it to free agency, and that's Mikko Rantanen. There's zero chance Colorado lets him walk, I think. That being said, everyone said that about Steven Stamkos too, so we'll see what happens. So that would be the only downside of it. Yes, someone would have to come out of the top 6. If we were going to push for a trade like that at the deadline or otherwise, our biggest need is a second line center. I am hoping that Kokiniemi bounces back this year. That's my biggest thing. A lot of this here, actually, I'll take the slides off because this was the last one anyway. That was the last one anyway. So my biggest hope, that a lot of these things are dependent on how guys step up. Does Jarvis find another gear this season? I think so. Does Aho have a 100-point season or get closer to it? Maybe. I don't think he needs to have a 100-point season personally. That's just not his thing. He's defense first. He's 200-foot game first. He's a two-way player. If he habitually has anywhere between 85 and 90 points, I think Aho's done his job, in my opinion. If we can see Svechnikov take that other step, be not just the power forward, but the power forward with a lethal ass shot. If you get that going, it's dependent on a lot of other guys. Does Nate just start to integrate with the system even better? And does Kokiniemi bounce back and consistently show signs of the ceiling that we saw before? It's dependent on a lot of stuff. So it was just more of a scenario of like, here's what you can do with that money. So maybe we should try to get Trocheck back. Yeah, if they manage that, I think they have a bridge in Brooklyn they can sell along with him. That would be great. But no, I'm really hoping Kokiniemi can bounce back. I've not given up on the kid yet. Fly Henry Fly says KK has to be bought after this year if he isn't good. In 22-23, he did get on the PP, and he'll probably get more minutes now. No reason to waste $5 million on a guy that was healthy scratched. Yeah, that's the one thing that worries me. But like, he does have to get better this year. There's no way around that. What happened to him last season cannot happen again. But I quantify what happened to KK being a severe case of being snake bit. It was a lot of bad luck, and like I've said a million times before, that overtime shot that Varlamov stopped, KK shot that from the most high probability position to score, dead in the middle of the circles. Perfect snapshot, had so much net to look at. And Varlamov, it was a effort desperation save that he made, and he got it with the butt end of the stick. And then the way that KK looked when he went back to the bench, I was kind of like, that's just how it's been for the kid. Like, everything he touched turned to shit, and it's not like he was out there just doing cardio. He wasn't being Pierre-Luc Dubois, I will say that. But that being said, what happened last season, the going months and months and months without producing at all, and then eventually that started affecting his defensive game. He lost his physicality. Face-off numbers got worse. That can't happen again. It was just a roll downhill from him when he stopped being able to put the puck in the net. So Fly Henry Fly says, didn't he start off really hot last year? Yes, he was our best forward last year for a while, in my opinion. For about the first 10 or 15 games, I want to say, he was helping the team stay afloat when they had that rough start. Like, he was a big plug and a big hole in that boat. I really think that. And then just out of nowhere, he fell off a cliff and he never got it back. Like it was weird. So, and to top it off, not only did he start off hot last season, he ended the prior season really hot. He did really well in the playoffs. And then eventually, like, I was like, okay, we're having a positive snowball effect here. He's getting better and better and better and better. And then that continued into the beginning of last season. I was like, okay, cool. Finally, he's going to shut all these people up that hate him for, being overpaid, saying he's a bust and all this other stuff. He couldn't handle playing in Montreal, and I wouldn't want to play there anyway. That's just me. But he was really starting to prove everybody wrong, and then all of a sudden he fell off a cliff like the coyote in the damn cartoons. I hope he went to go see a sports psychologist just out of the simple fact that like he absolutely just couldn't do it. It's just I can't explain what happened there, but it can't happen again. You're absolutely right about that. So speaking of Kotkaniemi, I got a story to tell from a beer league team that I used to, or a teammate I used to have, and then I'm gonna get out of here because I think the big dog's ready to walk and the little dog's over there hanging out. I don't know if y'all can see him on the camera. Come here, Butters. Come here, rat. It's my girlfriend's dog, but I kind of like him too. You good boy. Go hang out with your brother. Go. All right. But I liked getting Kotkaniemi in the offer sheet. I really did, because one, it was funnier than hell, and two, I'm like, this guy is going to turn into a solid middle six center, and we're really going to need him as Jordan Staal gets older, and eventually he's going to retire and everything. And that was the role I was expecting KK to start really filling. And I remember him and I aren't friends anymore, but he's a Sabres fan, and he fucking hates Sebastian Aho. Like it's almost irrational how much he hates Sebastian Aho, because Aho like dominates the Sabres every time that we play against them. It's a beautiful sight every time. And he told me that Kotkaniemi was going to overtake Aho, and he was saying Aho's last contract was too much for him, the 8.47 or whatever it was he was making. I'm like, bro, what? And yeah, he's like, no, Kotkaniemi's going to overtake him. He's going to be better than him. I'm like, if Kotkaniemi ends up being better than Aho, I will backflip and I will eat my hat, and I will be incredibly happy that we get a center better than Aho. But there was zero chance that was going to be the case. And as I start doing the individual forward deep dives, the way that I'm going to do that, I'm only profiling 10 of the forwards. I'm not going to talk about the 2 potential rookies in the lineup. I'm not going to talk about Jesper Fast. So I'm only going to be talking about 10 guys. I'm not going to talk about Lemieux because he's just the 13th forward. And then I'm going to do the defense all in one episode. But essentially, Kotkaniemi, his underlying numbers are not horrendous, but that was a result of him just eventually just not playing well. So, but yeah, that's all I got for this one right here. This guy clearly needs to walk. I don't want to go outside. It's hot. Set. Yeah, he has to go. Okay. All right, guys. It's been pleasant, but I'm going to get this guy walked because he clearly has to go. Thank you very much for watching this. And we will have another stream. Let's see. Today is Sunday. I am planning to do another one around Tuesday or Wednesday or so. I'm going to see if that's the first forward deep dive, if there's no other news. The first player I think is going to be, I think I'm going to start with Aho, and then I'll go from there. But thank you all for joining me so much. It's been a whole lot of fun. I will see you guys next time. Take care.